Welcome back to the Pam and Peggy Show. I'm Pam Wagner, and with me today is Bruce Shepard, curator of the Medicine Hat Esplanade Museum. Bruce, I was thrilled to see your current exhibit, which is about World War I and war in Medicine Hat community.
Medicine Hat's War.
Medicine Hat's War.
1914 to 1918.
Yeah,
yes.
So it's just an amazing exhibit, and I wanted to know how you came to decide to have that.
It began during my first week here as the new museum curator at the Esplanade, and my colleagues were showing me through the collection, familiarizing myself with what we had, and I observed that there was quite a bit of military equipment, and they informed me that Medicine Hat had a very long and distinguished military heritage, going right back to the Second Real Resistance in 1885. Which surprised me, I confess. And then they showed me some First World War items, one of which, a story robe from the Kainai, or Blood First Nation, which just blew me away. I had never seen such a powerful cross-cultural item. It's a blood warrior who had served overseas, came back, and in the traditions of his people, had a story robe created which outlined his war deeds, but it's the First World War.
Yeah.
And I think at that point my mind was racing. It was 2011, and I was thinking, well, 2014's right around the corner. And I blurted out, well, we should do a First World War exhibit. And quite frankly, since then it was like trying to find the brake pedal, because everyone was so enthusiastic and engaged and interested in doing something. And basically it evolved from there.
Yeah. And the opening was the anniversary, 100 years from the beginning of the First World War.
Britain declared war on August the 4th, 1914. And of course, Canada at that time was part of the British Empire, so we went to war beginning August 14th, 1914. And we had the opening on Monday, August 4th of 2014.
The crowds have been exceptional, I understand.
Oh, incredible.
What do you think is drawing people to the exhibit? What is it that's...
That's a very good question. I don't think it's ever one thing. I mean, medicine hatters and visitors have varied interests, but certainly there's a curiosity, very powerful. Many people, of course, have read or had some knowledge of the First World War from school. In Medicine Hat's case, I think it's the family connections. We've had so many people comment on their fathers or grandfathers or great-grandfathers had served. And in many cases, they're finding the names or recognizing photos, and so there's that immediate connection that we have. We've had a surprising number of European visitors through this year. We always have quite a few tourists, but we've noticed more Europeans this year. And I suspect that might have to do with the fact that, of course, they are very familiar with the First World War, and they're curious to see how a medium-sized Western Canadian community interprets the events. And their comments have been very, very interesting and wonderful.
Yeah.
A number of military people from Battis and CFB Suffield have come through, and I think there's a professional interest there, and they have been very positive in their comments. So I would say it's a variety of things, but certainly local pride, family connections, interest, all rolled together.
I was really struck by the photographs and the actual artifacts, some of the, and I wondered, how did you choose? It must have been difficult to...
It was exceedingly difficult. The First World War, in many ways, has been one of the most talked about and written about wars of all time. The American Civil War had been photographed, the South African War, but the First World War was just photographed from so many different perspectives. There's actual motion picture footage. Men and nurses who served had pictures taken at home before they went overseas. And the citizens of Medicine Hat have been incredibly helpful over the years. We are a community museum, and well over 90% of our holdings have been donated by families and individuals. So we had a wealth of material. In fact, we had over 300 photographs from the First World War period in our own collections, let alone going into other collections. As far as artifacts, that was one of the first things we had to look at. I ordered a printout of all of the items we had, and it was about this thick. But many of them were smaller pieces, buttons and collar dogs and so forth. But we knew we had a good foundation, but that we would have to probably reach out to other institutions. And that's one of the things that having the Esplanade really affords us, is that we now have an A-level museum. We have the proper environmental controls and physical conditions, security, so that when we ask a national museum like the Canadian War Museum if we can borrow an item, they will consider it. Before, you wouldn't measure up. You still have to wait to hear, but at least you're now at the door.
Handling those artifacts that are delicate and ancient, 100 years old and
more.
And more, yeah. The one thing that stuck out for me was the knitted socks by Queen Mary knitted them.
Yes.
And I looked carefully, and you know, tiny little stitches.
Yes. We've had several knitters say that she did a very good job.
Yeah, exactly.
Very straight. And,
straight, yeah, and lots. So how did those came from?
Well, they came from Calgary. What had happened, as I said, we knew we had a good foundation, but we reached out to our colleagues in other institutions, and we asked the Galt, the Glenbow, the Museum of the Regiments in Calgary, the Royal Alberta Museum, and others, if they had any items pertaining to Medicine Hat soldiers or nurses who had served, or the regiments, or anything connected to the First World War that we should consider. And the Glenbow got back to us with a list of items, many of which we already had good examples of, but mentioned that they had these Queen Mary knit socks. And one of the themes that we wanted to develop was the social impact, and the research had already revealed to us that many Medicine Hat women had been knitting and were involved with the Red Cross. And we didn't really have any examples of that, but here was a pair of socks knit by a queen that was 3 hours away, so we had to borrow it, and they were very gracious in allowing that to come down, along with a number of other items.
Their uniforms.
Yes, those are from our own collection.
Oh, okay, and I noticed that the helmets didn't happen right away in World War I. I guess what really struck me, the way the exhibit is set up, is you really do get a feeling of being very close to that experience. The gas masks, that you've got some barbed wire. And,
thank you.
It did convey that.
We wanted to have some. When we first started, well, the first thing we had to decide is this worthwhile, and I don't think there was any question that, as I said earlier, people wanted to do this. We recognized the value and importance of it. But then the next thing we had to look at is, well, is this something that's going to be in our own galleries, or are we going to design it to travel? And because that's a very different process at work. And we decided very early that no, this was Medicine Hat's story. We assumed that other communities would be doing their own, so why would they want to borrow a exhibit from us? And that has proven to be correct. It's also much more expensive to develop a traveling exhibition, and we are citizen supported. We're a local museum, so we're mindful of the resources that we have. But once those decisions were made, it came down to, well, are we going to make it thematic? Are we going to do chronological? Are we going to do atmospheric? And we decided that we wanted to do thematic primarily because if you want the chronology of the war, there's an excellent library in the city, and you can get so much of that from other sources. So we started with, as I recall, 15 themes, which we recognized was way too much. We narrowed it down to about 11, and we ended up with 5. And what we found as those themes, we were putting them together, was that the chronology was emerging from them, and that with the artifacts and with the stories, we were giving people a glimpse into that era. And then now that we've added some of the atmospheric elements, we're getting responses like yours. And it's very gratifying. Many people have said they find it's very balanced.
Yes.
They don't feel overwhelmed by the military technology as they do in some other institutions.
Yeah, it was very, yeah, you got a real sense. Being able to, for me, the bluebird nursing uniform,
Yes.
and the beautiful, poignant portrait
Yes.
of the young nurse who
Yes.
didn't come home.
Yes.
So very tender, very
Yes.
personal. And I mean, because normally military things, I think, oh, well, guns and knives and bullets.
And it's very interesting. One of the positive comments we've been getting from the military people from Suffield and Battis is how much they appreciate being shown as part of the community, that they're not separate from the community. And that's very gratifying to us as well.
For sure. Well, it's an amazing exhibit, and I can certainly appreciate the time and care that you and your staff put into this.
And our volunteers.
And your volunteers.
Many volunteers,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. You have docents or
Well,
volunteers?
docents, yeah, gallery guys. But we approached it different. We had our volunteers were involved right from almost the beginning in the planning, in the research, and the development.
Oh, okay.
It was really a community effort.
Okay. So that's maybe why it feels so much like it belongs there. And
Good.
so if people
Thank you.
haven't seen it, they can see it during museum hours?
Yeah, we're open Monday to Friday from 10 in the morning till 5, and Saturdays from noon till 5, and the occasional Sunday when there's a special event.
Right. Often during concerts and things?
Yes, in the evenings, yes. And people can get, if they have a concert ticket, they can get into the galleries at no additional charge.
Wonderful. So, well, it's an amazing space. It's an amazing exhibit, and we're very fortunate to have it right here. So thank you, Bruce, for all your efforts and for spending your time to tell us about it today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. So here we are. Remembrance Day is coming up, 100 years since World War I, 70 years since World War II. Wars keep on going, but I guess we pull through and we learn what we must and we survive. So thank you all for sharing this experience with Bruce and with Lawrence Gordon and with the whole community. And for those of you who are remembering your lost loved ones on Remembrance Day, we will stand at attention and in silence to pay them their respect, the respect they deserve. Thank you.